Well, I was born in Haverhill, Massachusetts, in November 13th, 1920. It was a white house situated on Merrill Avenue in the Rosemont section of Haverhill. It was painted white, as I said before, and behind the house, but probably a quarter of a mile, there was a railroad track, and trains used to pass through, and I used to listen to them at night. I can remember that. There was a little ice cream stand about maybe a half mile up the road, and we used to walk up and buy an ice cream cone. I think they were a nickel then. And we had a little bit of a pond across the street where we used to go ice skating. Only thing, I can remember one thing, and it was a music that was playing while we were ice skating when I was a kid. And the music goes down and around, whoa, 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 and it comes out here. Seems to me that was what we did. Things were a little bit different in those days. When you went to see someone, you went to their house, and what you did is you would, Bobby! You had to yell for them. You were not allowed to go up and knock on the door. And they would never answer you, like say, Bobby's not home. You, Bobby, Bobby, and you might do this a dozen times, and if nobody came out, you went on your way. So it was really the strangest thing in the world, but that's the way things were done then. The West School, where I spent at least my grammar school years. That was only up the block on Barker Street, I would say probably 500 feet. It was a wooden structure, two-story, painted gray, and it had, of course, a recess yard, which was asphalt. But the teachers there were just marvelous. I can remember my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Goldstein. I think I had a crush on her because she had blonde hair. She was relatively young, but I think she also had a crush on Mr. Pearson, the music teacher. So I enjoyed their classes very much. I ended up in Mrs. Scannell's class in the 6th grade. And then I also was very friendly with Leona Woodbury, who was the principal. Now, she was a nice lady, and as a matter of fact, I went back to see her after I left the area. But she was always very good to me, and I respected authority. And some of the kids that I had in my class, there was Hilda Binns and Mary Batts. That's not a joke, it's really, those are people. There was Philip Leahy, Felix Dumas, and the Skay brothers, and the John Smith, who I referred to, and Bobby Carlton, and the Trussell boy, and we used to have a good time. But Felix Dumas, for some reason, had it in for me. Every day almost, at the end of school, on my way home, he would stop me and want to fight. Well, I fought him, okay? But every day I would lose. But I'd just go back and I'd get some more every day. So finally, Felix and I sort of wised up. We stopped teasing each other or going after each other. It's kind of like a bully, I would say. But I had some very good friends, and we had a great time playing together. I remember one time, a little bit later in life, I think I might have been about 12, 13, I bought a kayak. Now this kayak was made of oilcloth. And it had a frame. It had a very nice paddle. The paddle was the best thing about it. I bought it for $2. And I brought it down to the Spigot River, and I didn't know how to, operate a kayak, but it was very simple. And I used to go up and down the river all the way to the falls. They have falls down in Methuen, but close by. And I really enjoyed being in that kayak, and it was one of my best friends. I was never really close to my father. He didn't take me out to baseball games or football games or anything like that at all, and we were never really close. As a matter of fact, if I had to write down all the things about my father that I recall, I could probably write it down on one legal-sized piece of paper. So I can't say that we were close. He was not demonstrative, not the kind to always come up and give you a hug or tell you I love you, what have you. My mother, by contrast, was a very, very loving person and a sweet person. And she worked herself to the bone and never complained. There were 7 of us, and she would just work on, and she was really a redeeming factor. She was a sweetheart. So I'll always revere my mother. My father was kind of aloof. As I recall, he was dressed to the nines, always wore a felt hat, and he wore spats. I don't know if you're familiar with spats, but in those days, they were a covering over a dress shoe, and they're usually gray felt, and they had little buttons, and you would button them on. It was like a cover for your shoe. And he always wore an overcoat, always dressed in a suit, and never without a tie. And he was a well-respected man in town, and he had some friends. One was Tom McCarran, and the other was Sylvester Doucette. And they used to play cards all the time. And I recall that, my father may have said it a couple of times, I just don't understand that boy. He comes in the house, he goes right upstairs. Well, upstairs I had a lot of books to read, and I had a big apple tree right close to my open window, and I was able to reach out and pick an apple, and I'd put salt on it, because they were green apples. And I did that, and at that time I think I was just starting to work for my father in the milk business. And I must tell you, it was the hardest work anybody could ever have done, because I worked easily 100 hours a week. And as you know, there's only 168 hours in a week, and the rest of it was for sleeping, but there was virtually no time to play or anything like that. Another activity which I was more involved with was I loved to go up into the trees and swing from branch to branch with a big long rope. I think this was more or less prompted by the fact that I loved Tarzan pictures, and I used to go to the movies quite often, and I read all the Edgar Rice Burroughs books, and Tarzan was one of my heroes. And I used to climb up on top of the barn and stand there right on the peak, looking out, and I just was in my element. I loved heights. That was true. And I remember one time I was going to manufacture a parachute. And what I did was I took some tire chain and I used the chute actually out of burlap bags. And we have a window out of the back of the barn that might be about 20, 25 feet to the ground. And I took a horse's saddle and put it down a cushion of fall. And I jumped out of the window and I plummeted like a rock. Right down, and my knees came up to my chin, and I thought I was going to knock my teeth out. But those are the things I did, and I spent more times in the trees than anything. In fact, we used to swing the birches. I forget about that. We'd go in the woods, and they had all these birch trees. And we'd take and swing from one birch to another, because they were very flexible. And they gave, we had a lot of fun doing that. And maybe that's why I was so interested in flying later on.